that Bethel would be the Jewish community that we wanted to join because we felt so welcomed. We felt warm and fuzzy from the moment we stepped into the lobby doors. And we feel that Bethel has given us a lot of gifts over the years. It's really enriched our life as a family. It's helped support and explore our own Judaism and what Judaism means to us. And we've participated in so many programs, services, community activities. That's been just so exciting for us. So we've made many of our family memories through Bethel. You know, something that will always stand out in my mind is the marching of our Torahs from our sanctuary to Trinity Presbyterian, and then back to the Bethel sanctuary, and chanting and dancing and singing, and just those are sort of embedded in my memory and will be for the rest of my life. Through the Talmud Torah program, our Hebrew school, Zoom has actually given us the opportunity to watch him learn Hebrew and read Hebrew and sort of sound out words, and get to be silly with his favorite Hebrew school teachers and learning how to daven mincha. So it's sort of been a blessing in disguise to be able to sort of see behind the scenes at how much he enjoys his Jewish community at Bethel. We enjoy Shabbat. We enjoy Shabbaton. It's probably our favorite Bethel activity. And it was even a blast when we were Shabbatoning from home this winter. We love Purim. There's nothing I don't love about Bethel, but I think most importantly, it's the fact that it gives us a sense of community. And so for us, in sort of the early family stages, we didn't have a will. We didn't really think about sort of estate planning and things like that. So when we started thinking about that process, it was really a no-brainer for us to consider Bethel as a part of our estate plan, mainly because it's made our lives so much better, and it certainly enriches our son's life. And so we want our legacy to endow our son's generation and future generations so that he can have the same kind of resources that have been given to us. I want to take a brief moment to thank the community members who are on the call today, who have already signed letters of intent and formalized their commitment to the Life and Legacy program. We are eternally grateful to you and thankful for you, because you have already acknowledged publicly that you recognize what a blessing Bethel is in your life and how it will be for future generations. Norma and I are very happy to speak to anybody who's interested in learning more about the Life and Legacy program. We're happy to send you that letter of intent. Another benefit is that the more members that we sign up for this program, the more members who sign up, Bethel gets bonus money, as we call it. And we know that operational money is really needed at this time to help us support the programming that has really sort of helped our most distant community members thrive and feel connected in this very distant time. So I'm very thankful to you all for being here with us and Mr. Stein today. I appreciate you, and I'm going to toss it to Rabbi to speak a little bit next. Thank you all.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you, Norma, for your incredible work in sharing that very important program. And I do just want to say to everybody, you know, Bethel, Josh, our synagogue is 139 years old. The first Jews, we trace ourselves to 1887. So no, 134 years old. And you know, the truth is that we only started this program of legacy giving a few years ago, and before that, our endowment was started by our beloved Gladys and Earl Siegel. But wow, if people had been leaving just a little bit of their estate to the synagogue for those first 110 years or so, the synagogue would be in a very different place financially. And really, this is about us being able to continue to be a synagogue that is welcoming to people where finances never stand in the way. So I just want to say my appreciation to Valerie and Norma, and encourage everybody to take this step. And all those small percentages of states make a very big difference. I want to say thank you to Attorney General Josh Stein for your service to to our state, for your service to the public. It is not an easy thing to be a public official, and we're grateful not only for your spending time here tonight, but for your service for in helping to create a more just North Carolina for us all to live in. I'm going to offer a short Devar Torah tonight. We have the holiday of Purim coming up, and Josh, you're more than welcome to join us for the Megillah reading. We're doing it all on Zoom, and the story of Purim is, for the rabbis, linked with the commandment to blot out the name of Amalek. Amalek being that nation that, when the Jewish people were heading out of Egypt, took advantage of the moment and struck out at a blow against those who were most vulnerable, the stragglers and those left behind. And the rabbis teach something important. I'm going to share my screen for a second. They noticed that in the book of Deuteronomy, we first read, and you can see it here on the screen, we read some verses in chapter 25. You shall not have in your pouch alternate weights, larger and smaller, because you know what you would do with those alternate weights? You would, that was a way to cheat somebody in business, where, when you were weighing things out, it says you shall not have in your house alternate measures, a larger and a smaller, but rather you must have completely honest weights and completely honest measures if you are to endure long on the soil that the Lord your God is giving you. So we are reminded in just a small way of the importance of being just and doing business honestly. And right after that, we read the passage. It continues, for everyone who does those things, who deals dishonestly, is abhorrent to the Lord your God. And then we have the commandment, remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. And the rabbis, they said that this is no coincidence, that the commandment to use, to deal honestly in business is juxtaposed with the with a memory of what Amalek did to us. And I'll just share with you one beautiful comment from, whoops, no, not that one. Hold on. I mean, that's also a beautiful comment, but let me see if I can pull it up here on the page. Let's see. Yes, this is from the Gur Aryeh, the Maharal of Prague, who says, God created a fair world. Therefore, when a person lies regarding his or her measures, your enemies will no longer be restricted to the proper measure of power allotted to them by the Creator, and they will be free to harass you. The Maharal of Prague here is saying that if you act by dishonest measures, if you say, well, it doesn't matter, if I cheat a little bit here or cheat a little bit there, what you are doing is not just hurting the person with whom you're doing business, but you're actually creating a world in which people no longer have respect for boundaries, and you're creating a world that is not only unjust in business, but creating a world that it's more dangerous to live in. And so as we think about the holiday of Purim, and we remember to blot out the name of Amalek, a symbol of destruction and hatred, the rabbis were telling us that goes together with building a more just world. And Attorney General Stein, we're grateful for your work in holding those accountable who need to be held accountable, and for helping us to build a more just world and a more just North Carolina for us to live in. I am now going to turn it over to your friend and longtime acquaintance, our synagogue president, Leslie Winter, to introduce you.
Thank you, Rabbi. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to our congregation, Josh. Josh was first elected as Attorney General in 2016. And as far as I and my brother Dennis and Joel Fleischman have been able to determine, he is the only, except for one person who might have been appointed to the Court of Appeal some decades ago, Josh is the only Jewish person to have been elected to statewide office in North Carolina, at least in living memory. And I kind of doubt that anyone was before Joel Fleischman could remember. So we're very honored to have you here in our synagogue. Before Josh was elected as Attorney General, he spent 8 years in the North Carolina Senate, and before that was Senior Deputy Attorney General for Consumer Protection. And over all these years, he has stood up for us North Carolinians in many ways, including protecting us from predatory lenders and telephone scammers, combating the opioid epidemic, working to provide us with access to affordable health insurance, helping victims of rape and domestic violence, working to assure our drinking water is safe, and co-chairing the governor's task force on racial equity in the criminal justice system. So that is a wide array of things that he's been working on to protect us and to stand up for us. Josh grew up in Chapel Hill and attended Dartmouth College and Harvard Law School before returning to North Carolina. He is a smart and caring and committed and savvy leader who is also a good listener and a good team player. He's just the kind of person North Carolina needs to have as a leader. This is very personal to me. I've known Josh for a long time, having practiced law with his father, Adam Stein. Adam taught me a lot of what I know about being a good lawyer. And I now have the privilege of learning from 2 generations of Stein men. So that's a great privilege. And I'm delighted to welcome Josh to Bethel.
Thank you very much, Leslie. And I know that I can speak on behalf of my father in saying that 2 generations of Stein men have learned a great deal from you. I've known Leslie, as she said, for many decades now, because she and my dad practiced law and really helped make North Carolina what it is today, a much better place, a much fairer place. Obviously, we still have many miles yet to go to make it everything that we want it to be. But my goodness, we have come a long way already. I said at the beginning when we first joined that I wish, by the way, I did succeed in the interim to get my parents on the Zoom with us. So you have some Chapel Hill interlopers. Adam and Jane Stein have joined us tonight. So Mom and Dad, thanks for being here. Good to see you. And I'm glad that you were able to hear everything that Leslie just said, because everything she said is 100% true. And so you should take pleasure in that. I do wish we could be together in person, but obviously Zoom is the best alternative we can come up with. And the fact that we're doing this by Zoom truly underscores the upside down times in which we live. In the last year, a year unlike any other, we experienced the deadliest public health pandemic in 100 years, the worst unemployment since the Great Depression, a long overdue reckoning on race, a climate crisis in real time, and then most recently, an unprecedented assault on our democracy. These are massive forces, and that they've all come within a 12-month period of time is really head shaking. And it has, of course, impacted the work that my colleagues and I do at the Department of Justice. And I want to talk about each of these big issues in turn. First, the pandemic. Just yesterday or the day before, we crossed a threshold that I didn't think was possible. 500,000, 500,000 Americans are dead because of COVID-19. Nearly 11,000 of these folks were from North Carolina. And to any of you on this Zoom who have lost a loved one, a friend, a colleague, I extend my heartfelt condolences for that loss, and may their memory be a blessing. As bad as this has been, it could have been worse here in North Carolina. And I, for one, am very grateful for the steady science-based leadership exhibited by Governor Roy Cooper these past 12 months. My office has assisted him. We draft and defend his executive orders. When he makes his policy decisions, we translate that into legalese, and then we go to court where we've had them all upheld. And it's all about protecting our public health. We've also combated price gouging. Our office received more than 2,300 complaints from North Carolinians about price gouging, concerning things like masks, cleaning supplies, toilet paper, water. There was a company from New Jersey that was trying to sell masks to UNC and Duke Health Systems, to the Red Cross, and to North Carolina State Emergency Management. And it was making representations about its price that raised red flags. And we received complaints from these institutions and investigated and concluded that Stephen Gold was misrepresenting the price and would have secured $30 million in profit on every successful transaction had they gone through. Well, we went to court. We got an order stopping them from doing what they were doing, making sure they complied with state law, and they paid a $250,000 penalty for violating the state's price gouging law. We have seen every scam imaginable. Scammers are unbelievably creative, and they take whatever is the news of the moment and then create some scam to try to steal people's money or personal information. And so early on, it was about miracle cures. Then it was about economic impact payments. Then it was about fake tests, and now more recently, fake vaccines. We've seen scams representing that they can advance you in priority to get the vaccine, which obviously they can't do. Contact tracing scams. So we have been doing, redoubling our efforts to engage in consumer education so that you can protect yourselves and your loved ones who may be more vulnerable than you. But if it sounds too good to be true, it is. You can't, there isn't a miracle cure. There isn't a vaccine that you can buy on the internet. There's not a test that you can buy on the internet. Be very skeptical when somebody represents that they're from the IRS or the Social Security Administration and they can help you get your economic impact payment if you give them a fee in advance. Obviously, it's a criminal trying to steal someone's money. And do not let someone pressure you. Don't be subject to force. If you have any questions, just hang up the phone and call my office. We have a toll-free number, 877-5-NO-SCAM. As a result of this pandemic, we have seen greater unemployment than we have seen in 85 years. 1.4 million North Carolinians have filed for unemployment since this crisis hit. And so we've been doing everything we can to try to provide economic relief to people until we can all get to the other side. So I negotiated something called the Carolina Relief Plan with Bank of America and the State Employees Credit Union, the largest bank, the largest credit union, whereby they worked with their customers in financial distress to help work out payment plans and an agreement not to foreclose or get the underlying credit with security, that they would agree to pause on that for their customers. I've supported the governor's executive orders to stay evictions and utility disconnections for people who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own because of COVID-19. I've championed an open enrollment period for the Affordable Care Act, and I'm thrilled that the new President Biden has done just that, and we are in an open enrollment period. So if there are people out there who need health insurance, they can get it. I urged Congress to reform the PPP program to make it more accessible to small businesses on Main Street that need help. Another crisis that we've confronted has to do with the inequities. Well, the inequities exist in our healthcare system. We're seeing it because of COVID-19, where African Americans are dying at a grossly disproportionate rate. But after the killing of George Floyd last May, it really was a smack across the face of this country. And plenty of African Americans fully understood that our criminal justice system did not treat Black people and white people the same. But for a lot of white people, it was a harsh reality. Last summer, the governor created a task force for racial equity and criminal justice. And he asked me and Associate Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, Anita Earls, to co-chair that effort. The Durham Chief of Police, CJ Davis, is a member and has been incredibly helpful and constructive. The governor was very clear to me that he wasn't looking for some blue ribbon commission report to sit on a bookshelf. He wanted us to be an action-oriented task force that would both identify and then implement important recommendations. After months of hard work, we issued a series of recommendations, 125 in total. And if any of you want to see our report, we also have an executive summary. If you don't want to read the whole thing, just go to our website, ncdoj.gov/TREC, and this information is all there. But the recommendations we issued in December concern things like rethinking public safety so that we respond to crises appropriately. Many 911 calls concern mental health incidents in which we would be much better served by having social workers respond rather than law enforcement. A number of recommendations about policing practices, community policing, excessive use of force, a duty to intervene for all law enforcement. Others concerned accountability and transparency, universal use of body cams and dashboard cameras, ensuring that officers can't wander from one department to another if they have issues with excessive force. Recommendations about recruitment and training to make sure that we have the best people who are motivated to serve as guardians, not as warriors. We had recommendations about decriminalization. We want to study all misdemeanors, and we recommended that the General Assembly immediately decriminalize marijuana, expunge criminal records of people who have simple possession charges and paraphernalia charges from the past, and that there be a broad-based study of the matter of legalization of marijuana. Recommendations about bail reform, fairer juries, recommendations concerning juvenile justice, raising the age of juvenile jurisdiction. If a person is 6 years old, a kid is 6 years old, they're subject to our juvenile justice system. We are the youngest age of jurisdiction in the entire nation. Fines and fees. So that was all what we reported in December. This year, it's all about implementation. We've reorganized the 25 members so that we're now oriented around, do we implement this at the legislature? Do we implement this in the courts? Do we do this statewide through agencies, or do we do them locally with local sheriffs and police departments? Our objective is to make true the words that are chiseled on the face of the United States Supreme Court building: equal justice under law. I want to talk about climate change. Just last week, we saw a winter storm freeze Texas. Last summer, wildfires burned California and much of Western America. There were 3 hurricanes that pounded the Gulf Coast, and that's on the heels of a couple years ago, the 2 hurricanes that each generated 500-year floods. I don't think a flood can be considered a 500-year flood if we get 2 within a 3-year period of time. Climate change is not some abstract future problem. It is a real and present danger. I support our federal government's most constructive efforts to deal with this problem, the Clean Power Plan and Clean Car Standards. And I went to court to sue the Trump administration for its efforts to weaken them, and we succeeded, thank goodness. I'm also working to advance the governor's clean energy goals here in North Carolina, both at our Public Utility Commission and at the General Assembly. So all of this work is in addition to the normal work that we do at the Attorney General's office, and it's all about protecting the people of North Carolina. We do it in a lot of different ways. We promote public safety. So I want to make sure that we address the crises of untested sexual assault kits in North Carolina. We did a count a couple years ago and came to the realization North Carolina had more of these untested sexual assault kits sitting on the shelves of local law enforcement than any state in the entire country, which is unacceptable. I mean, each one of those kits came from a person who experienced an awful trauma, an incredible violation. And then they underwent hours of an invasive examination to deliver evidence to the criminal justice system. And the criminal justice system failed them. They did nothing other than to put it on a shelf. So we developed a strategy to attack this problem. We now have a tracking system. So we know exactly how many kits there are and where they are, which increases that transparency, increases accountability on the system. We secured funds to outsource these kits, both grant funds from the federal government and $6 million from the General Assembly, championed a law called the Survivor Act. Another part of the Survivor Act is a requirement that going forward, every law enforcement agency must submit a reported sexual assault kit to a crime lab so that, one, this never happens again, and two, we want to eliminate the backlog once and for all. It is working when we test these kits. In the last year, Durham has made 11 arrests, solving 15 cold cases, rapes and murders because of this work. We are delivering justice for victims. We are putting violent, dangerous people behind bars. And in the process, we are making the public safer. I'm also working to tackle the opioid epidemic, which a lot of people have forgotten because, unfortunately, I think the imagination of the media is only one public health crisis at a time. And so COVID has supplanted the opioid epidemic. But the sad reality is that COVID has made the opioid epidemic worse than ever. It is raging. Last year, there were more people who died than any other year in the history of the country. It's the deadliest drug epidemic. More people died from a drug overdose than any other year, the deadliest drug epidemic in our nation's history. So we developed a strategy focused around prevention, treatment and recovery, enforcement, and litigation. I drafted a bill called the STOP Act to reduce overprescribing because overprescribing was driving addiction and overdose. We put together a public education campaign called More Powerful NC. The website is great. It's called morepowerfulnc.org. It's chock full of useful information, both for people who want to know what they can do, but also for families who have a loved one who is struggling. We support and put on take-back events so that people can get these highly addictive drugs out of their medicine cabinet and give it to law enforcement where we incinerate them to make sure they cannot fall into the wrong hands. I advocate for treatment. North Carolina must expand Medicaid. The single most effective step the General Assembly could take in our fight against the opioid epidemic would be to say yes to the federal government's offer to expand Medicaid, because we have 500,000 North Carolinians who could get health insurance, and that would help them pay for the treatment that they desperately need. I've worked to give law enforcement the tools that they need so they can go after the traffickers and dealers who are making money off of people's sickness. And I'm working with law enforcement to try to move more people with addiction out of the criminal justice system and into the healthcare system, where they can get treated and become well. On the litigation front, I have sued Purdue Pharma and their owners, the Sackler family, for their role in creating this crisis. I recently settled with McKinsey Consulting. McKinsey is a consulting firm that advised Purdue Pharma for 15 years on how to aggressively market these pills and dramatically increase the number of prescriptions and the toxicity of the pills that were being prescribed in order to make money. And they succeeded. Purdue made more money, McKinsey got more fees, and the consequence was more people became addicted, more people overdosed, and more people died. This $600 million settlement, North Carolina will get 19 million, which shall go to abating the crisis. I am helping to lead the national effort of attorneys general, everyone in the country and the territories, 56 of us, bipartisan, working in cooperation to hold the drug distributors and other drug manufacturers accountable. And we are working hard to come up with a resolution around $26 billion. All of the money, other than the fees, will go to abate the crisis. If the companies do not step up and do the right thing, I will not hesitate to take them to court as well as these other companies, because they have profited. They created this crisis. They must pay to help clean it up. Other consumer issues we've worked on are Robo Calls. This is the #1 complaint we receive at the Attorney General's office. In fact, 1/3 of all complaints that we hear from North Carolinians concern unwanted telemarketing. I'm doing everything I can to fight this scourge. It's annoying to you and me, but it's incredibly hurtful to vulnerable people. People lose millions of dollars, hundreds of millions collectively every year to these criminals. I negotiated, again, on behalf of every attorney general in the country, a series of anti-robocall principles with the large phone companies, whereby they will deploy technology to screen out more of these calls and cooperate with law enforcement so we can hold the wrongdoers accountable. I took one of them to court last year in Texas, a robocaller that makes auto warranty calls. Who all has gotten an auto warranty call? Raise your hand. They're incredibly annoying. So we're putting a stop to him. And next, I want to go after the telephone service providers, these small companies whose networks the robocallers depend on in order to make these calls. The providers are enablers and they profit. They get fractions of a penny for every call that goes through their system. We want to insist that they know who their customers are and what they are calling for so we can put a stop to these robocallers. Other work we do is protect taxpayers by holding healthcare providers that defraud the Medicaid system accountable. We had a program called Operation Root Canal, in which 10 providers have had to reimburse taxpayers $6.3 million in restitution. All in, over the last 4 years, we've recovered more than $100 million back to the taxpayers. When folks cheat Medicaid, when they cheat the government, it forces you and I to pay more than our fair share, which is not right and which I will not accept. We work to ensure that our air and our water are clean. And I saw earlier my colleague, Dan Hirschman. I assume he's still on the call. If he isn't, he'll get in trouble for leaving early. But Dan heads the environmental division at the Attorney General's office and does a tremendous job protecting our natural resources. His team, on behalf of the Department of Environmental Quality, negotiated a resolution with a company called Chemours outside of Fayetteville, had a plant that was discharging Gen X, a forever chemical, into the Cape Fear River and emitting it into the air. Well, they agreed to the largest environmental fine in state history, a commitment to put $200 million of capital investment to eliminate 99.9% of their air emissions. And I have actually sued them and their predecessor, DuPont, to force them to clean up the impact on our natural resources. On behalf of Department of Environmental Quality, our environmental division also negotiated a resolution with Duke over coal ash. That agreement requires Duke to excavate an additional 80 million tons of coal ash on top of the 40 million they'd already committed to doing, and putting in lining so that when the coal ash goes in, that coal ash and the toxins that are in it cannot seep into our ground and surface water. It's all about ensuring that when you turn on the tap at home, you don't have to worry if that water is clean and safe. And just this month, my consumer protection folks negotiated a resolution with Duke Energy about how to pay for that cleanup. The Public Utility Commission had ordered that all of the cost of the cleanup be borne by you and me, the ratepayers. And I thought that was unfair and unacceptable. I appealed it to the North Carolina Supreme Court. We got a decision that was encouraging and December, and we just reached a resolution whereby Duke is going to shoulder over $1 billion of that cost over the next decade, so that's a savings to North Carolina ratepayers. I want to talk about the insurrection in Washington on January 6th. An unbelievably troubling occurrence. This violent storming of the Capitol by thousands of people was an assault on what is perhaps the most important physical building in our country, the citadel of our democracy. It was an assault on our elected representatives, every member of the House and Senate. And fundamentally, it was an assault on our democracy because they were striving to stop the lawful counting of the votes and to give effect to the democratic will of the people. In the wake of this insurrection, 8 people died, including 3 law enforcement officers. We saw images that shake us to the core: a noose hanging, a Confederate flag walking through Statuary Hall, a T-shirt declaring Camp Auschwitz. It is contrary to everything, every principle this country stands for. And what makes us truly exceptional, unlike any other country in the history of this world, over 220 years, there had been 25 peaceful transfers of power, presidential power, from one party to the other. That is until this year. This event must serve as a clarion call to all who love this country. And it must serve as a turning point for our broken politics. But for that to be so, it depends on each one of us individually. I do not believe that the people of this country are naive. They don't expect people to agree on all issues. They understand that we will agree. They simply want us to be civil and respectful of each other, with each other, and of each other when we do disagree, and to look for compromise when we can. They certainly want us to uphold the Constitution and to defend the rule of law. I believe that we must come together as one people with a shared understanding of what it means to be an American. Out of many, one, e pluribus unum. It is who we are. Part of my belief that we can achieve this comes from my faith. As Leslie noted, I'm the first member of the elected statewide Council of State in North Carolina history who is to be elected who's Jewish. And the Torah teaches us as Jews that because we were brought out of bondage from Egypt, that we have a special obligation as a people to advocate for people on the margins of society. Tikkun olam, repairing the world, is a central tenet of our faith, and working to create a better world for ourselves and for others. It's a form of justice. As it is written in Amos 5:24, let justice well up as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. The pursuit of justice is ingrained in our faith. It's what motivates me as a public official. It's what I learned from my parents. It's how I was raised. It's what motivated Leslie Winter throughout her august career, whether it was serving as a partner of my father in North Carolina's first integrated civil rights law firm, or serving in the state Senate, or as president of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. I hope it is that this pursuit will motivate all of us as we look ahead and continue our hard but necessary work of defending and strengthening our democracy. To the rest of the world, the United States truly has been a shining city on a hill, a beacon of hope, but neither the city nor the beacon shines unless we each do our part to clean and polish the city or to power the beacon. And that is the work of every generation. And we are no different. It falls upon us to repair our democracy. And as your Attorney General, I am committed to doing that. And I will always be there right beside you in this most urgent work. I appreciate your time this evening, giving me the opportunity to talk to you, and look forward to your questions and thoughts and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. We do have time. We do have time for some questions, maybe 15 minutes. Do you have 15 minutes?
And Dan Hirschman wanted to make sure you know he's still here.
Good job, Dan. I figured you were.
So I think it'll be best if you all either use your raise hand function or just put your hand in front of your face. I see Judy Siegel. You're on mute, Judy.
Yes, so I know that the North Carolina legislature in recent years has done a lot of cutting of taxes, particularly the personal income tax. So I was wondering what the funding situation at the Department of Justice is. And I have a particularly soft spot for the Consumer Protection Agency because I'm a former consumer attorney with legal aid. And I was wondering about that agency in particular as well.
Thank you, Judy. The Consumer Protection Division is actually doing fine. And the reason for that is in 2011, after the last recession, the legislature made the Consumer Protection Division self-funding. And we're so good at protecting consumers that when we get a little bit of money, we're able to put it to an account so that we're able to support all of the staff in the Consumer Protection Division. In 2017, unfortunately, the legislature slashed my budget by $10 million, which represented a huge percentage cut of the legal services we provide the state. And I had to let go eliminate 45 positions.
Ouch.
It was terrible. And then, thank goodness, a number of our client agencies, like the Department of Environmental Quality, like the Department of Labor, Department of Insurance, they understood the value proposition of our lawyers, and they took on paying for their lawyers. So we didn't have to let more people go. We still have a budget hole that we need fixing. It turns out that North Carolina has a fairly decent financial reserve. It's between $4 and $5 billion. And this is a function of the fact that state government has operated under a budget that was set 3 years ago because the governor had vetoed the last two budgets by the legislature, and then the legislature wouldn't agree with the governor on a compromise. And so we haven't had a new budget in 3 years, and we're working off of that old budget. And so there's a lot of money that's unspent. So the cuts that were made to my department were by no means a budget consequence. It was, I believe, for political purposes. And we're trying hard to convince them of the value proposition, and that by refunding us, it benefits the taxpayer and the public in terms of crime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Katja, I see you have your hand up. You're on mute though.
Sorry, yes, my mute button was covered by a little pop-up on my screen. Hi, thank you. I do have a couple of questions. Thank you so much, Attorney General Stein, for coming and talking. Regular folk don't usually have an opportunity to have a one-on-one, so thank you to the synagogue for organizing this. I have a couple of questions for you, and you can, I guess, choose if you want to answer both or just one. One question is related to what you called the opioid epidemic, but I wanted to specifically ask what you're doing about fentanyl. I work in the field. I work with death data, and by my count, about 2/3 of our drug overdose deaths involve fentanyl to some extent, and I don't hear enough people talking about fentanyl. And I will say that I certainly don't want to give Trump any credit, but I will say that he accidentally said okay things just purely by chance, kind of like a monkey typing will eventually write, that thing. So like a monkey, he occasionally can say the right thing. When he said that he was going to cut back on, illegal fentanyl imports from China. And I was like, yay, and I'm sure he never did. But the reality is a lot of our deaths in this state are related to fentanyl lacing the drug supply, that somebody might not die of an overdose due to solely one of the drugs, but when they have fentanyl and they don't realize it's there, that's why they're dying. So I'm wondering if you have any actions. And then my other question, so you can choose, is farm workers. What is your office going to be doing as growing season begins to protect the people who grow our food? And North Carolina is a huge agriculture state, to make sure that they're protected from getting COVID, to make sure they have all the PPE they need, because that was a struggle last year, and just to make sure that they are protected from unscrupulous growers who take advantage and do wage theft and overwork them and don't give them appropriate time off. So what is your office going to do to make sure the people who supply our state with food and make our state a huge agricultural state, to make sure that the actual human beings are protected and cared about? So choose one or the other if you want, or hopefully you'll do one of them at least. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katja. Yeah, fentanyl, for those of you who don't know, is an exceptionally powerful chemical opioid. Opioids come from opium, the poppy seed, and morphine was one of the early iterations. Heroin is like 50 times more powerful than morphine. Fentanyl is over 100 times more powerful than morphine. And it is what is killing people. People were hooked by the pills, the proliferation of these pills, and they messed around with them and got addicted to the opiates. But when they're using either a black market pill or black market heroin, it's being laced with fentanyl. I mean, all it takes is a grain of salt amount of fentanyl to result in somebody's overdose and potential death. I was talking to a treatment, just to give you a sense of scale and how grave the problem is. I was talking to a treatment provider in Robeson County last week. And to date, this was as of last week, so 6 weeks into the year, there had been 21 overdose deaths. Every one of them involved fentanyl. 20 of them involved Lumbee Indians. And this is in comparison to 51 the entire year. So in the first 6 weeks, the overdose death rate was 3 times what it was last year. And so we're facing it's a dragon, and it's roaring, and it's killing our people. So I've updated our criminal statutes to make sure that all forms of fentanyl are covered by our controlled substances law. There were actually instances where people were arrested, but the chemical composition of that fentanyl wasn't illegal in North Carolina. We have given law enforcement tools to do a better job identifying drug trafficking networks to shut them down. Yes, the president talked about trying to stop the flow of fentanyl from China and Mexico, but it comes through the US Postal Service, and it comes in. There's no ability or way to stop it. And it is truly devastating. We want to do everything we can to limit supply, but far and away the most effective solution is to eliminate demand by treating people who are addicted. That's why I want to resolve these cases against the companies, come up with these billions of dollars that can go to treatment. I want to expand Medicaid so there are more treatment available, options available. I am publishing an op-ed in The Hill, the newspaper in Washington, calling on Congress to revisit a law they passed in 2000 that makes it harder for doctors to treat people with opioid addiction. It requires no special training for any MD who has a DEA number to prescribe a highly addictive opioid painkiller. You have to go through special training as a prescriber, 8 hours if you're a doctor, 24 if you're a paraprofessional, and then you have to get an X waiver, a waiver that allows you to treat a certain number of people. There's a cap on the number of people you can treat. And the drug that you use to treat opioid addiction, buprenorphine, is substantially less dangerous than the oxycodone or hydrocodone or whatever it is that got people addicted in the first place. It is insane. It is upside down. And I actually, to your point about President Trump He issued a regulation in the first week of January modifying that rule according to recommendation that attorneys general made to him a year earlier that I had helped. In fact, I drafted and got 38 AGs to endorse. He modified that rule. Biden pulled the rule back from a procedural grounds, and he's going to reissue it. So either Congress is going to pass it or the administration will address it by regulation, but it's all about making treatment more available and to reduce the stigma. As it relates to farm workers, the labor issues are covered by the Commissioner of Labor, and the health issues are covered by the Department of Health and Human Services. And so I am the lawyer to state agencies and departments. We advise them on things they can do, but they are our clients, and we can't direct agencies of what action to take. So for instance, Dan, on the cases against Chemours and Duke Energy about Gen X and coal ash, we were working hand in glove with the agency where their priority and our priority meshed, and we together negotiated those resolutions. But it has to be a collaboration between the client and the council.
Are there other questions for Josh? You all are not a quiet bunch of people. Rabbi?
I was trying to let everybody else. So Josh, thanks very much. I know that you led the task force for equity that you spoke about at the beginning, and there were 4 main recommended areas, and one of them was focused on police reform.
Yeah.
And I would just love to hear, we've had a lot of murders already in the beginning of 2021 here in Durham. And I would just, love to hear, it's such a crucial issue across the country in terms of the way in which police forces treat the Black population. I'd love to hear, just what do you think are the key things that we can do as we tackle this problem in North Carolina?
Well, I am a big supporter of law enforcement. We need law enforcement. If we did not have law enforcement and had to resolve our disputes among ourselves, it would be chaos and vigilantism. And so law enforcement keeps us safe. I want them to focus their energy on violent crimes, like the murders that are occurring in Durham, like the sexual assaults that exist in our society. Too often, however, the bulk of the calls which law enforcement responds to when somebody calls 911 are not criminal justice related. They involve someone in crisis. Often it's a mental health crisis. And so I believe we should reimagine public safety so that when somebody calls 911, we respond with the professional, with the appropriate training, a social worker, a counselor, a drug addiction counselor. There are people who are better suited, depending on the nature of the call, than an officer. And if we do that, then officers will have much more time to focus on the violent crimes, the murders that are occurring, so that the drug trafficking, the fentanyl that is killing people in our communities, then that way we are all safer. And I think that's a win-win. We have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people that they serve. They cannot succeed if the people don't believe they're serving their interests. And so recruiting the best officers on the front end, training them appropriately so that they're well-skilled and respond appropriately, having clear guidance and rules that govern their interactions with the people, and then real accountability and consequences when they violate those rules, so that we should have an early intervention system for somebody who in their career early on engages in wrong use of force, so that we can correct that behavior so it doesn't happen repeatedly. And there are some people who just simply should not be law enforcement officers. They don't have the right spirit. And those people should find another job. And we have to have a system that weeds those people, the wrong people, out and make sure that they can't get fired in Durham and then go get hired in person. And these are all things that we have recommendations concerning in our report.
And can I ask you just a little bit of a follow-up? Can you say something about, regarding January 6th, there were concerns about white nationalists infiltration into law enforcement. They did extra scrutiny of the National Guard. Can you just talk about what you think some of the concerns or things are that particularly the Jewish community, what some of the threats you see in North Carolina?
Yeah. There are white supremacists, there are anti-Semites, there are ethno-nationalists throughout our state, throughout our country. So I don't know, if some of you are doctors, there are some who are doctors. If some of you are lawyers, there are some who are lawyers. If some of you are teachers, there are some who are educators. And there are also some who are in our National Guard or some who are in law enforcement. Maybe some of those people are attracted to those professions even at a higher rate than they exist in general society. I've not seen data to stand for that proposition, so I can't say that definitively. The thing is that we give a lot of power, authority to law enforcement. They're the ones who have by law the ability to stop us, to detain us, to restrain us, to arrest us. They have a gun, they have a badge. That's an immense power. And we have to have the right people exercising that power. And so every agency, every law enforcement agency, the US Army, anyone where they serve a purpose and carry a gun, we have to have the right people doing it.
So Josh, I think, do we have time for one more question? It's now 8 o'clock. So, or maybe 2 questions, because I see Hope Harton and I see Mary Jo Mandel. It's hard to turn either of them down. Can you take 2 questions?
And Rhoda Silver, and I will try to be much quicker. How about that?
Okay, so we're going to go Mary Joan first, and then Hope, and then Rhoda.
Stein, I just wanted to ask you to repeat the web address where we could see all the recommendations that your task force recommended on racial repairs.
Sure. ncdoj.gov, that's our main website, ncdoj.gov/TREC, which is the Task Force for Racial Equity and Criminal Justice, TREC.
Thank you.
And Alan has just put it in the chat. Hope.
I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about voter suppression and gerrymandering.
Part of the work that we have to do as people who love this country is to make sure that our democracy works the way it's supposed to. And that's where every eligible voter who wants to vote can vote safely and easily, and that their votes matter, that they vote. Nobody's vote is worth more than anyone else's. Obviously, voter suppression are efforts that are designed to keep some people from voting, making it harder for some people to vote than other people. It is anathema to democracy. There was a law that the legislature passed in 2013. I was in the state Senate then. I fought it like with everything I had. It passed because of the Republican majority. Governor McCrory then signed it into law. It was challenged in court by fellow North Carolinians. As Attorney General, I was forced with the decision of whether to, when there was a Fourth Circuit decision, which is the level right below the US Supreme Court, that said it targeted African Americans with, quote, almost surgical precision in 5 distinct ways. And then the legislature wanted to appeal it to the US Supreme Court, and I refused. I said, I'm not gonna do something to make it hard for Black people to vote. Like, it's just not what I'm for, particularly when the court, an appeals court, had said it was unconstitutional. And so I refused to do that. And the governor, and that law was struck down. And as a result, we now have 17 days of early voting. We have the ability, if you vote in the wrong precinct, to have your vote counted. We have same-day registration. All of these things were struck down by that law. Gerrymandering, we've had some of the worst gerrymanders in the history of democracy. There was some social scientists from Harvard who analyzed the 50 states. They specialize in analyzing democracy worldwide, and they applied their methodology to America and concluded that North Carolina was 50th out of 50 states, and we're the least representative democracy in the Western world. And there was another case about partisan gerrymandering. It got thrown out at the US Supreme Court, but it was in state court. And on behalf of the governor, I wrote a brief arguing that partisan gerrymandering violates the state constitution's equal protection, free elections, and free speech and association clauses. And that was the basis by which the court struck down those maps. And so we have better principles governing the maps than we did before. And we will see what the legislature does going forward, both as it relates to changing the voter laws and drawing new maps in the new year.
Thank you.
Rhoda, you get the last short question.
It is a short question. I wanted you to clarify about these rape kits. I wasn't clear if you said we had caught up or that there's still catching up to do. If we're still catching up, how long do you anticipate before the old kits are finally cleared?
We've done a couple thousand of the 15,000. I wish we could do them all immediately. The problem is there's really only one national lab that does this DNA testing, and we're not the only state with this problem. And so I negotiated with them an increase of 50% for them to increase the capacity, which they dedicated to North Carolina. But at the current rate, it will take about 2 to 3 years to eliminate the full backlog. But we need $9 million in money. The cost went up 75% based on last contract. So I'm going to the legislature seeking $9 million to make sure that we can once and for all eliminate that backlog.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you so very much for being here. I'm going to hand it over to Valerie, I think, to close us out.
Thank you.
Valerie? There
Yep,
you are.
sorry. I just wanted to unmute and get back on video. Once again, thank you so much, Attorney General Stein, for joining us this evening. It's such a wonderful opportunity to have such an esteemed member of the Jewish community join us on a really intimate level. I mean, you've literally come into our homes, and not everybody can say that they've had the Attorney General over after dinner to hang out for a talk. So that's been really fun. Thank you again to everybody who joined us today. A special thank you again to Norma, my partner in crime in Life and Legacy, to Leslie, who leads our synagogue, Rabbi Graber, Alan Friedman, and the many of you have already made a commitment to the Life and Legacy program. Again, if you have any questions about the program or want to sign up after today, we'd love to have you. You can email me. I'm in the Shul Cloud directory. I know you guys are all excited that we have an online directory now, or you can get my email from Alan or Rabbi or Leslie or Norma, or probably half of you have my email already. It's been such a wonderful night. Thank you again, Attorney General Stein.
Valerie, thank you, Rabbi. Leslie, thanks for the invitation. Great to see you all.
And next time we'll look forward to feeding you.
And I look forward to eating it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.